know me, my name is Vincenti. I've done a lot of work with Gulf War land over the years, and individual group lands and stuff. So Her Excellency Katerina asked if I would kind of share some of what I've learned and done. So we'll go into it. So war land considerations and planning. Welcome to a game of life-size Tetris. The first thing to remember is to always remember to remain flexible, because no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you do, and no matter how much pre-work you do, when you get there, something's going to be different. You're going to have to improvise. You're going to have to come up with something. Somebody's tent that they brought is going to be a different size than was planned. There's going to be a tree that you didn't know about, or a big hole that you didn't know about. No telling. So remain flexible, expect and plan for there to be something, so that you're not stressed out when it does happen. So first off, if you think about being in charge of land for your group at Gulf War, Diamond War, Pinsic, War of the Rams, or any other large event or war, you're going to be in charge. If you're going to be in charge of land, most of your work needs to be done before you ever get there. You need to be the first one on site, or you need to have a deputy that's going to be the first one on site with all of the plans. Because if you're not the first one on site, I promise somebody's going to be setting up tents where they're not supposed to. They're going to set them up in the middle of a walkway. They're going to set them up. They're going to look at it and be like, oh, well, you know, I didn't really want to be right next to that, so I just moved over a few feet. And the next person's going to get there and say, well, I didn't really want to be that close. I didn't want to encroach on them, so I moved over a few feet. And suddenly all of your layout and planning is now 5 and 6 feet off from what you had originally planned, which can be an awful lot of land. So somebody's got to be there with the plans, preferably you, before it opens, and the last one to leave. Sometimes it gets split up between more than one person. If the same person's not going to be able to be there for the beginning and the end, or it can also be split up. Maybe somebody wants to be, somebody's be happy to be in charge of it there, but doesn't want to do all of the legwork beforehand to gather all the information. So more than one person can be in charge of this. For instance, on the map that you see there, that was from Gulf War 2019, showing all of Instructor. To give you an idea of what you're looking at, right over here, if you can see my mouse there, this is the trailer, and this is the Green Dragon, and then Instructor land stretches from there all the way down to where the towers are, and then on down to here. So we've got a long distance across, all the way back to the ravine, on all of that. And then across the road, we've got this big area directly across, well, not directly across from towers. The Axmore might be upset if we try to claim their land, but almost directly across. And then to the east of that, we have a big section of land that comes down and goes all the way to that road and all the way up behind Nova to a pine tree that's over here. So Instructor has quite a bit of land there, but we've also got a large number of people that go. So we have to kind of Tetris all the groups in, and then the groups wind up having to Tetris all the people in. So make sure that somebody is on there first to prevent people from putting up stuff where it's not supposed to be, because having to go up and tell somebody that they need to take the tent back down that they just put up and move it over 6 feet does not make them happy. So one of the first things you do when you're going to be land is get with your camp leader, which would be like your B&B or the Crown or Alpha or household leader, whatever. Get with them and find out if they have any special things that they're looking for or they're expecting. Are they expecting a kitchen? Are they expecting a shower? Are they wanting a quiet area for kids? You know, what you need to find out the things that they're looking for so that as you're planning, you can be making arrangements for that. And the same thing as far as find out if they've got a kitchen, who's in charge of the kitchen? And what are they looking at? And what are they bringing as far as a tent and layout? And what about common area? Fire pits. Those are all things you need to figure out before you ever start laying out land. Now, your job might seem somewhat easy or unimportant, but when you're talking about somebody's vacation that they're going to spend a lot of money on, and they've been looking forward to and planning for a long time, and they get there and the first thing they encounter is a big mess with no idea what's going on, it starts off their vacation really bad. And they wind up upset for the first, several days of the war, maybe the entire war. So it's really, really critical to get as much of this figured out ahead of time, which means sometimes you have to be a pest. If you're not getting the answers you need from people, you need to keep pestering them. If you go to the B&B and they won't give you the answers, you've got to keep pestering them, and eventually you say, okay, this is the way I'm doing it, and this is the way it's going to be done. If this isn't what you want, you need to let me know now, because you're on a finite timeline. They can't decide after they get there that they want certain things, because it's not going to work. And you're just going to wind up with a lot of people that are upset. So plan on spending a lot of time before you ever get to war, getting things figured out and organized. A well set up camp doesn't happen by accident. It happens because somebody spent a bunch of time working on it and figuring it out. Now, sometimes you can go to a large event like Instructor 40th. Some of the areas had quite a bit of land, and they didn't really have to worry as much about the Tetris. They could kind of say, okay, you guys put your tents over that way. We're going to put the fire pit over here and the kitchen right there. And you might be pretty well set up. You go to some of the other places, such as Gulf War. It's a very finite amount of land that you have. And you don't have the ability to just say, well, we need more land because we've got some extra tents we're bringing. Because when you go to the Gulf War land person, he's going to say, well, no, that's all the land there is. We don't have the ability to get more land or make more land. The drawing that you see on the screen is it. That's what Instructor has to work with. There's no way to push out and magically have new land. So you have to really work with it. For Gulf War, you have the Gulf War standard is 225 square feet per person. Now that land's not given to the person. That land is given to the land person, whoever's in charge. And then it's up to the land person to use the land to accomplish the goals of the group. If you want a common tent or a kitchen, you don't get extra land for that. That's part of the 225 square feet. So how that works is that's every person that's pre-registered, whether they're a child or an adult, a youth, whatever. If they're pre-registered for that group, then you get land for them. If they're not pre-registered for the group, then you're not giving any land for that person. So the more people you have pre-registered with your group, the more land you have. And because the limitation of the land, you have to really control what is allowed on there. And that may sound like a pretty harsh word or a pretty strong word to say what is allowed, but that's exactly what I mean. It's what you allow to be on there. Because just because somebody wants to show up with their, 25 by 25 pavilion doesn't mean they can set it up. It's whether or not you're going to give them the land for that. And if it's for one person, you can't do it. There's just no way to do it. You're not going to have the land in the room to allow that. You're going to have to say, no, I can't allow that. Can't let it happen.
Can't you also have them register a ghost person or something and pay for 2 people?
No, that's specifically not supposed to be done.
Really? Okay. I didn't know that.
As long as they pay, Vinny?
Even if they pay, they frown on groups that try to do ghost registrations. And I know especially this year they were really going to be going around and watching for groups that had 15 kids registered, since kids were free. They were really going to be checking. They don't worry about it with Anse Dior as much. They really worry about it with permanent land groups. Because the permanent land groups, if they don't have a certain number of people for consecutive years, they can lose their land.
Yeah, Caitlin actually just made a post about that in the chat. She said, I have permanent land, and even if there are more registrations, I don't get more land. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. She has that land, period. It's like Wolfstar. They have a set piece of land. As long as they have, I think, 25 people or something, they get that land. And actually, if they show up for Gulf War next year and they only have 15, they still get all that land. However, they do that for a couple of years, and then the Gulf War autocrats and the Gulf War land person will come in and say, okay, you're now in jeopardy of losing your land, either all or part of it. And so there was a period several years ago where Wolfstar was running short on people, and they wound up inviting, what was it? Would they have Great Dark Horde camping over there with them to help boost the numbers up. Now they're back at a point where they've now come back to a bunch of us that normally camp in Namron and stuff and said, we love you guys, but we really don't want you to come camp with us because we don't have the room. If we all went down there, if everyone in Anse Dior that was Wolfstar wanted to go camp with Wolfstar, they wouldn't have room for everybody. They'd suddenly be down at, 140 square feet per person. And that'd be really cozy. Not much fun.
Yeah, Deb said 3 years ago they had so many people in Wolfstar they were on top of each other in the chat. But I told her that happens in Namron too. We've had times when we've had our ropes crossing. just to have
Yeah.
enough room.
Well, we do that a lot. That's one way that you don't gain land, but you have better utilization. For instance, on a tent that's like my tent is a 15 by 15 Panther Pavilion. So 15 by 15 is 225 square feet. And there's two of us that stay in there. That years ago when we didn't have very much stuff, and Katerina and Orlando didn't have as much stuff that they take either, the four of us shared that tent. Now somehow we all seem to have more stuff and it doesn't all fit as well. So we now just have the two of us in there and they have their tent. So it takes up a little bit more space. But anyway, 225 square feet. But in addition to that, the ropes stick out 3 feet all the way around. So that really means your footprint for the tent is 21 by 21, which is quite a bit more. That comes out to 441 square feet as opposed to 225. So the way you can help make it so that it doesn't take up as much is you can overlap ropes some. So we frequently, in Namron, we will put period tents beside each other and then overlap the ropes 1.5 feet. Yep, Marguerite's got it. Across the ropes, because when you cross those ropes and have the stakes going down, then you wind up with, you gain 1.5 feet on each one, you just save 3 feet of space. And if you do that on multiple tents, that adds up to a lot of space, which really helps make it possible to have, Namron always has a big kitchen and arming tent, shower, common area. It's all set up, so it's really nice and people enjoy it. But if you have everybody using as much land as they possibly can, then those things have to go away. Now, the good news is at Gulfport, most years, we have quite a bit more than 225 square feet per person. We actually normally run in at about 265, 270 square feet. Now, if you look at the map there that I've got up, we actually, when we're referring to it and working on it, we use it as 4 different quadrants. You've got the northeast quadrant up over here in the top left corner, or sorry, that'd be the northwest. Listen to what I mean, not what I say. So that'd be the northwest quadrant up there. And then as you're looking at it at the right, you've got the northeast quadrant up there, and then southwest and southeast. The ones that get the most land per person consistently is this corner down here, the southwest part. And the reason they get more land than anybody else is because they have more trees. That's a lot of trees to put tents around. So they have to work really hard with their Tetris to get around all those. So you got to really plan that. The area that gets the least amount of land normally is directly across the road from them in the southeast part, where Namron and Greenville normally are, because they don't have as many trees. So they can actually get by with a little bit less. So when we have to crunch the numbers and figure out where everyone's going, we do take that into account and understand where these bunches of trees are and where things are sitting to try to allow that, so that you don't have a group that has a whole bunch of their land filled up with a batch of trees and they can't put their tents in.
Hey, Vinny, we have a question in the chat.
Okay.
So for a permanent structure like Moonshadow's new bathhouse, does that eat into their available land?
No. because where that was built at, I worked with JP on figuring out where that could go. And where that was built at was basically uncampable land. That the shower platform actually is on a slope. The platform doesn't slope, but the land there slopes quite a bit and would not be suitable for camping anyway. So he was using unusable land to put in a shower, and no SCA money was used to do that. That was not done by the SCA or by an SCA group. That was all done through private money. And they did the work and everything on it and set it up, but it was put there so that it didn't really take any campable land. Now, in the case of, there is another permanent structure up over here. Everyone knows about it. They may not think about it. It's a bread oven that was done right over here on this little corner. And that is, it doesn't get any extra allotment really for that, although it doesn't take up much room, but it doesn't really get any extra allotment. But that area there gets a little bit of extra land per person because of the number of trees, and they work around it. And also as a note on that, there are taxes that are paid each year to Larry, because the county assessor came out and said, hey, you've done all these improvements on your land. We have to up your taxes. So they upped his taxes, and he said, hey, guys, you're costing me money here. So not on Steeler, but the group's people, I should say, pay taxes each year to Larry. He has himself or somebody working for him come by and collect it. And the taxes run like $60 or something like that per year total. That counts the towers, the Unstorn towers with the gate and everything, the shower platform, and the bread oven. And so as land person, when I was doing the land, Ace is handling it right now, Sir Ace of Hearts. We go around to those two groups and we say, hey, your annual taxes are due, and they pay $15 or whatever, and they're done. And go ahead.
Vinny, does Coastal, I know when they built the bread oven, someone was saying that gives them that permanent land. Is that true?
Yes and no. There was no agreement that I ever found stating that, and the agreement that was done with JP was not a guarantee that
right.
Cattle would be camped right beside it, but that he would always be camped as close to it as possible.
As possible. Okay. Thank you.
Which is why the kingdom has always been very hesitant to allow people to do any permanent structures, because if everyone does permanent structures, it has to be very careful where they put that permanent structure. In the case of both of these, they're located very much out of the way, not right out in a big middle part. For instance, if Bringwell put in a big permanent structure right down here in the middle of where they normally camp, that would be fine most years, but what happens, we've all seen it that have been around very long, we've all seen where a group dwindles down and sometimes disappears. And if Greenville dwindles down to where they now only have 7 people attending, how do you give them a piece right out in the middle of somebody else's land? So they've always been very cautious about allowing anyone to do permanent structures. And if a permanent structure is proposed, it has to be submitted through the Kingdom land person and to the Kingdom seneschal, and then be sent to Gulf War land and to the permanent structures group and to Larry, and then from there coming all the way back through to be able to get it approved. So it's not a very quick or easy process. And it's not something that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not something you,
go.
it's not something you can decide in December that you're going to build something at Gulfport this year, because it's not going to happen. It won't even get looked at. Now, if you start now, you'd have a chance of maybe being able to build it next year. Maybe. Not real good, but you'd have a chance. Because really, they're going to want to go to exactly where you plan to put it and stake it down exactly where you're talking about, and then survey how that does with the land that you're on and with the groups around. It's not going to be just, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Put it over about there. You know, it is something that has to be looked at very carefully. Okay, so let's see. Moving on with that. Let's see here. I want to show. Okay, so this is a Namron layout. One of the things that's important on these is to be able to have a walkway that people can get into and out of their tents. So if there's always a way for them to get around to wherever they need to, and to be able to get to the kitchen, the shower, the arming tent, whatever your areas are that are set up. And that's why you have to be careful if somebody's wanting to bring their tent with an awning. You may or may not be able to allow them to put their awning up. For instance, if you look at this one, if, say, Kaylee there in the top center kind of, with a round tent, had an awning that she wanted to put out that was, you know, was going to stick out 7 or 8 feet so she could put her chairs and stuff there. That would make it almost impossible to get through there. To get back and forth, you'd have to go around the whole thing to be able to do anything. So people can't just decide they're going to bring awnings and be able to set them up. Because when you think about it, if somebody's got, back to the 15 by 15 square, if they've got a 7 by 7 awning that they're going to put up, that's another 49 square feet. However, if you put it on my 15 by 15 tent, that means it's going to be sticking out right here in the middle, an extra 7 feet. But this other area on both sides of that awning still can't be used by anyone or anything. So I've now basically increased my tent size from a 15 by 15 to a 15 by 22. So now I'm going to be taking up 330 square feet instead of 225 square feet, and that's not even counting the ropes. So that goes back to being careful and making sure that people understand they can't just bring extra stuff and expect there to be room to set extra stuff up out in the open area, because there's just not a lot of open areas sometimes, especially if we've got a big war. When it was Owen Crown? No, it wasn't Owen. We had a really big war, and it was so big that Namron had like 55 people, and there wasn't room in the kingdom to put them. So they actually put all of Namron down beyond early period life, down beyond end of the world, in an area down there. It was that crowded. And even doing that, the people in kingdom were still only getting the 225 square feet. And that was even moving 55 people out. It was a big year. So let's see. So it's clear path and walkways. Trying to put period tents together. This one happens to be color-coded. If you wonder why some are gray and some are yellow, the yellow ones are all period tents. So we put all the period tents up on the road to help with the ambiance of Gulf War. And then put the mundane tents, the nylon tents and stuff, on the inside. Now, if you'll notice, there's still some a number of period tents that are on the inside, but we try to make sure that there's only period tents on the edges, just to help with the overall appearance. So after you've worked with their excellencies or your camp or household leader, and you found out about army tents, shower tents, common tents, room for bardic, fire pit, whatever, now you're almost ready to start to work. So now's when you have to really become a pest, because you need to get all the information for everybody that's going to be camping in your camp. So all the people that are coming there that are going to be camped within your area, all of these are sized based on, well, we cheat. I used Duncan because he's really good in Visio. So he puts all this together, and actually these are all scaled to size, but you can do it any one of a variety of ways. We used to do it in paper, but the idea was to be able to have scaled size of all the tents so they're all the same. But to do this, you need to get the information from the individuals. You need to know what their tent size is. Is it a mundane or a period tent? Are there ropes that stick out on a period tent? You know they do. On a mundane tent, you know, they may or may not. Where's the door located? You know, is it located on the end or on the side? So if you look right in the middle, you'll see Uliana, or actually to the side of that, how about Connor? A gray one there. His opening was on the side there. But that had to be found out before we ever got to Gulf War. Because if you get to Gulf War, you've got to plan this way, and his tent doesn't have a side opening, only has an opening on the end. Now you've got to rotate this thing, and now it's going to be sticking out into part of the walkway. So you need to find out where the door is located. When will they be arriving? When will they be leaving? This can be really important if you've got a area and you're planning to put somebody way back in the back, and they don't get there until, you know, Wednesday, and they've got to have a way to be able to get through to be able to get their stuff in. If you know they're not getting there till late, you might put them out at the edges. Or if you know they have to leave early, you might consider putting them to the edges. You can't always. Those are things you just have to consider as you're working on it.
Hey, Vin,
so
what are the dots?
Yeah.
What are the little dots on the map? Someone asked, and I don't know.
Oh, these little dots, these kind of darkish ones right here, that's a tree. We have that area mapped out, so we know exactly where the trees are actually located. This red dot up here is where a fire pit could go. So, yeah, we know where those trees are, and we, on the big map, we also have where there's a couple clusters of trees. Where there's a cluster of, 8 or 10 trees, a bunch of brush in there. You've got 150 square feet lost right there that can't be helped. So we have some of these marked. So that's important. If you've got land that you normally camp on, while you're there, take some good measurements. Have somebody get some good measurements of where those trees are located, if there's a ravine, if there's something else that you need to deal with. Look all that stuff over. Now, when you're working with their excellencies or your camp leader or household leader, and they're saying they want a kitchen, okay, great. You want a kitchen. What size is that tent? What type of tent is it? What do you expect to be under there? And that goes for shower, the common area, the kitchen, arming tent, whatever. Also, what about trash cans? And that starts getting to kind of a gray area as far as if you're in charge of land or if you're the camp mom or camp daddy, or if you're just in charge of the kitchen or what. You need to find those areas and make sure you know where your job starts and ends. So you don't wind up with the kitchen people getting there and saying, okay, where's the tent? And you say, what tent? And they say, well, the kitchen tent. You're supposed to have it. I was like, no, I was supposed to make room for it. I made room for it right there. So define those areas just ahead of time. Have a business meeting and say, okay, who's in charge of what? Who's doing what? It'll save a lot of headaches. Also, where's a wood pile going? If you're going to have a fire pit, do you have electricity in the camp? Is there electricity available? How's it getting there? If there's any areas that slope quite a bit, if you camped over on the northern side of Onstior and camped next to the ravine, some of that land becomes unusable because it's sloped too much. Also, if you go to some of these wars, you have things like fire ants, branches, stumps, all kinds of stuff that you may have to deal with. So be prepared for that. We always show up with some ant killer before we ever get to site. We have it with us, so when we get there, we start treating stuff. Basically, you can't have too much information about the land. When you first get there, walk the land, go through it, see if there's any big issues or problems. Is there a stump you didn't know about? Is there a tree you didn't know about? Is there a big hole in the ground because they had to dig up some pipes or something? Walk it, look for fire ant hills, treat those at the same time, and see if there's any major problems. Then lay out the land. If people show up and they're ready to set up their tent, tell them, well, that's great. You're not ready for them to set up their tent, but they can start raking the common areas and helping with that, or they can help you if you need help getting it all measured out, because if Kaylee shows up and wants to set up her tent right now and you haven't laid out any of the land, you can't afford for her to be off 6 feet. If she's off a little ways, then somebody's tent can't be set up. So you've got to just tell them they're going to have to wait a little bit. You love it that they're there. If they can help you with it, that's great. They can work on raking, chopping roots out, doing whatever. But until you get it all measured out, they can't start setting up. Once you get it all measured out and you know it's all right, that's when you can start setting up your tent. Some of the tools that you may need and that you may want to have will include things like Actually, I'm going to move this over. Let's see. Can you see that? Okay. Will be measuring tape, and 10-foot tape doesn't do much good. You need to have a much larger tape, and 25 is not good. You really need like 100-foot tape or 150-foot tape. We keep like 100, or what is that? In the tower, I think there's a 300-foot tape at Gulf War, and a measuring wheel that we leave there year after year. So you want a tape or a measuring wheel. The wire marking flags are really good. You can get a small bundle of those, of like 100 for not much at Home Depot or Lowe's, and you can stick them in the ground. And what you want to do is stick them in the ground and say, okay, this is where your corner stake goes for your stakes, or for their stakes. So you measure out all four corners all the way around for them. I also like to get the ground marking paint, the aerosol ground marking paint, and I'll put their initials in the middle of where their tent goes, just to make it a little easier. I've also used twine. Twine can be really good for marking off an area to make sure that they have it. Hammer, leaf rake, shovel, pickaxe, hand clippers, axe, bow saw. I love my Sawzall, so I take it. It's cordless. Ant bait, and an area drawing of them and map to show exactly how you've got everything planned out. And last but not least, your favorite drink. Depending on the temperature, you're going to want to have some water. You're going to be out there in the sun for a while. And when you get done, you're really going to want the other type of drink. And to be able to sit back and say, oh, I'm done with that. Because once you've got it all laid out, the vast majority of your work is now done. And hopefully that's before hardly anybody is even there. You've already spent a lot of hours, and you've already done a lot of work, but virtually all of your work is now done, because at that point, when people get there, you say your tent goes right over there, and you take them over and you show them where it is, and make sure they understand to be inside that area and where their door goes. And then it's their job to set it up. It's not your job to help them unload and to set up their tent and everything else. It's just your job to get them to the right spot. Now, if you've got the time and want to help, that's great. In inclement weather, a lot of times we've done fire brigades to, when we have a lot of people that show up at once, to help people get unloaded real fast and get all their stuff over there and have it covered so that they can go park their vehicle and we can get the next vehicle in. And that's part of being flexible and working as a team and as a group. So now they've eaten up almost all the time. Any questions? You can unmute everybody, Kat. Make it easier for anyone that wants to ask questions.
No, you covered amazingly a good amount.
Say again?
I am not sure he was talking to us.
What I went through, this will be posted wherever Kat's posting the files, because I'll give it to her so she can post it. And if there's any other things that you have questions on, I'm happy to help out.
Jane said, I can speak informally to the Pinzik situation if Sir Vincenti has nothing to add at this time.
Say that again?
Jane said, I can speak informally to the Pinzik situation if Sir Vincenti has nothing to add at this time.
I don't have anything to add. I'd be happy to hear.
Go ahead, Jane, you're up.
Jane,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I suddenly had to come to San Antonio this morning, so I'm on my laptop instead of my desktop. So we'll see how this works. I already got kicked off once. Mistress Serafina, who has been the camp mom for a long time at Penzic, is my pelican. So anything I say is totally with a grain of salt, and it's all hearsay and possible conjecture. But this is what I heard. Somebody asked if the amount of land was set in stone. And from what I understand, when Margaret was queen, we wanted that piece across the road that was like totally empty the year before and had lots of cars on it, which just drives Serafina crazy, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's handy to have some place to stick your big old car that does lots of grocery runs, but really, for the most part, if it doesn't belong to an Aunt Steorin or whatever, then she's like, get it off, or she'll put up fences. But that's I'm running off on a tangent. The point is, she wanted that land, and so she asked Margaret to ask the queen of whoever was in charge of that land if we could have it. And I think we did some kind of treaty. There might have been alcohol or cookies exchanged. I don't know. So there are ways to finesse the situation at Penzic for places to change hands, but that diplomatic behavior has to happen beforehand, or you're going to get lots of dirty looks and hear a lot of no's if you don't do it in advance. So there's opportunity there. Also, Seraphine is practically dancing a jig because there's no Penzic this year, and this was supposed to be her last year as camp mom. So she's having a good old time with that. So whoever gets it, whoever steps up, it would have been nice if they could have shouted her this year, but that's not going to happen. So it'll be a growing experience next year. Hopefully we'll still have Penzic next year. But that is all the conjecture and guesswork and hearsay that I have to add on the topic.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay.
Ian, did you have a question? Sorry, Vinny. Go ahead.
Oh, if somebody has a question, go for it.
I thought Ian maybe did, but he's muted now.
I did have a question, and it really is more about the diplomatic abilities and answers of if there is somehow a dispute or something was found to be wrong. Obviously, I know you're going to want to work to be the best to create a situation where it's best for everybody. Who ends up having final say, though?
I guess that depends on the kind of dispute.
Specifically dealing with land.
Well,
so I don't.
Okay. For instance, if we had it where we got to go for, and somebody had already set up a tent, and they thought they had set it up on their colonial land, but they actually set it up about 15 feet inside of somebody else's land.
Ouch.
Not just a little bit. Not like a foot, but like way inside. And it was like, oh crap! And they had already like unloaded and really set up some stuff. They've been there working for hours, and it's like, oh crap! And we had to run over there and kind of like, okay, you need to stop for a little bit so we can figure out what has to happen. Fortunately, the other group person that was in charge there got there, and they had somebody that had pre-registered, and then turned out that they were not going to be coming after all, so they had canceled. So they were going to have a little bit of extra room, so they were able to rearrange stuff, and that tent was able to stay. But there was actually the possibility that we were going to have to tell them, sorry, you're going to have to take down your tent and move it 15 feet and then put it all back up.
Oh.
Which is not something you want to do.
We had that happen to us last year.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, we did. Luckily, we liked the person well enough. We allowed them to stay. We did give them a very hard time. They were good friends, but we did make sure that, to let them know that they were in our lands. We laughed a lot with them.
Okay, well that's good. See, it works out sometimes,
It did.
and it worked. You know, it worked out that time as well. One time I got called over because there was a dispute because somebody's tent stake. It was a mundane tent, and their tent stake was over the line by less than a foot, and the other people were complaining. But then one of their tent stakes was over the other one, about a foot. And I was like, okay. So they were both like, you know, well, they're over the line, and we want to make sure it's known. It's like, okay, so, okay, stop before we go any further. And I was like, okay. And I turned to one of them. I'm like, okay, they are over the line on your side. Do you want them to stop, break down, and move their tent over 8 inches so it's off your land? And they're like, well, no, they don't have to do that. I'm like, and then they started saying, but I'm like, that's enough. And I turned to the other person. I'm like, okay, they are over on your side. Do you want them to stop, tear down, and set back up 8 inches over? I'm like, well, no, but okay, good. We're done then. Because it really was literally less than a foot. And I was like, really, guys, this is not some, I mean, it wasn't anything that disturbed the other one. But for some reason, they felt a need that it needed to go to the Kingdom Land person to let it be known that somebody was over on their side.
I think something that you said earlier about diplomacy is the most important thing. And also about this is people's vacation. I mean, a lot of people go to war to work, but they also go to war to have fun. And we had a couple, not last year, obviously, because no one went to Gulf War, but the year before, that it was their very first time at a Namron encampment. They didn't really know the rules, and they set up their tent, and then they also set up a pop-up with their kitchen. And I was the only landed on site. The current landeds weren't there yet. So the person in charge of land came to me and said, Katerina, they weren't supposed to do that. You need to go talk to them. And I said, okay, I can do that. But I went very politely and said, look, I know this is your first time here. I know you didn't know. And not only that, it really wasn't a big deal because where they had set it up, nothing was going to go there. And I did check to make sure of that first. Because otherwise we may have had to ask them to take it down. But, you know, I told them, okay, so this is okay. You know, we're going to go ahead and let you keep it. But next time you need to know that you may not be able to do this, and this is why, and explained how land works and said, you know, if you come again, just, you know, check before you set up an extra tent. So, yeah.
And then we're setting up a Facebook group is really good, and having everybody that's camping in your camp join that Facebook group and put out messages about if there's electricity, what's allowed or not allowed, if there's not electricity, if there's going to be a shower, are there camp fees? Some groups do camp fees. Not everyone does. Namron does. Greenwillow does. So I know some of them do, which covers the cost of some of the miscellaneous things, propane for the shower and the shower itself and things like that. So it's good to have, I like having a Facebook group and then putting information up there to say, hey, this is what the rules are. Here's what we're looking at. Here's what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure everyone's
too. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was
having planning meetings if you can before, so that everybody that's camping there can get together and can hear, okay, this is what, how we do things. That helps too. Did anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Well, Vinny, are you good? Did you have anything else?
I'm always good.
I know.
That's why I never.
Well, thank you guys so much for attending. Vinny, thank you so much for teaching. And I will get the classes posted probably tomorrow. Probably won't be tonight, but thanks everybody for attending and have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.